Why? They didn't want to get their paycheck whacked.
That's exactly
That's
correct.
what
But
happens.
Sally, you know from being down in South Florida, and Stan, I'm sure in your various travels, every home paper, print paper, has that reputation of being sort of like the hometown rag where, where there's a monopoly.
People need to keep in mind that newspapers, whatever they may say about journalism as a profession, are commercial enterprises.
Right.
And they are in business to make money through the sale of advertisement, not really through the sale of newspapers. They will not offend as a business proposition. They're major advertisers if they can possibly help it, only if there is no other choice. And even then, they would try to do it in such a way as to ingratiate themselves with additional advertisers who would take the place of the ones who were being offended. But I agree basically that the people should not be passing off the task of watchdogging their elected officials to the press. Winston Churchill said that in a democracy the people get the government they deserve. And that's absolutely true.
That's going to what Todd
We
Todd
must
saying.
have people, as citizens, we must have an informed citizenry. And to be informed, you have to take the time and trouble to inform yourself. In today's information world, there is no excuse for people not to inform themselves of any issue in which they have even a remote interest, except their own fundamental laziness.
Well, let me interrupt you because I thought that's a good point that you stressed there with the information age. And not to come across as self-serving, but it's obvious you're all contributors to this internet newspaper that we put out there starting 4 years ago. And it doesn't have a tremendous, if we get a tenth of what they have in readership, there's still another voice out there that's very immediate, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Does that kind of there seems to be a lot of resistance to the electronic media. It hasn't really shaped itself yet. Newspapers are still fighting within themselves. Do we go digital? Do we hold on to the print? And what kind of influence do you think that has, especially now in Volusia County this year?
Well, I think the influence is growing, but it's a demographic thing. And in Volusia County, especially here in the eastern part of the county, a larger element of the newspaper readership, I'm speaking now of the print readership, is of an age which is not really comfortable with the internet in a variety of ways. I mean, most old folks like me we can call up the internet and we can read articles on it, or we can word process or something like that. But when it gets down to the really serious internet activity, we get a little queasy. Gee, I wonder if I can really do that.
It's kind of funny
something
because
that they have to learn it. But where you are beginning to have your impact is with the younger folks, the people who are still raising their children and haven't retired yet, still working hard for a living, people in their late 20s and 30s and 40s, which is, in the United States these days, not really a growing segment of the population, but which is nevertheless the future, inevitably.
I think it's kind of funny though. For example, when we first started 4 years ago, there was no real Google Analytics. It was more of a one-dimensional thing. Now I can actually see, for example, 30% of the people that come to headlinesurfer.com are doing it through a cell phone, a smartphone, or a tablet. Never mind the big clunky computer or even a laptop. Cell phones, and they're watching videos on them, or they're getting Google alerts on news events that are happening with keywords and everything. What does that impact have in terms of the politicians playing to both mediums? There seems to be a little bit more elasticity this time around than, let's say, the last election I was involved in.
Well, you'd be a better judge of that than I am, Henry, but my feeling is that as your element of the media, your sector, the electronic media, becomes more popular, reaches a larger readership, and especially as it becomes the first choice of information for people, then politicians who, if they're successful, are always going to have their finger to the wind, are going to be to begin shifting their own focus as well. But still, what it comes down to in the end, I think, is the people have to realize, and the media have to realize that human nature being what it is, corruption is part of the price we pay for having a government. I've seen governments all over the world. I have never seen one that wasn't corrupt to some degree. I'm not saying that it should be that way. Most emphatically, it should not be that way. But it always is,
right.
and one needs to be on the lookout for it. The only way to see it, to understand it, is to be well informed as to the issues, and not just that the issue exists, but the details of the issues. And that needs to be done by people doing their own research. It needs to be done by media like yours and by the News Journal. And people have to sample several of them and make their own decisions.
Well, the one thing that, before we get into corruption, which is a perfect segue, that I find interesting is that you can have 10, 12, 13,000 unique visitors a day, and going against print media that has 40,000 subscribers, or readers rather, you know, between store sales and home delivery. But it just seems like the politicians now, they're gravitating. I mean, it's like a feeding frenzy of getting advertising, which is great. But what I find is once they're in office, then suddenly it's not so great for them, because the comfort level with getting what they want from the print newspaper and the inside deals and, you know, the advertising authorities and the CRAs becomes more pronounced.
But who are the real losers here? The voters.
Of course.
Because they have one opinion. And journalism isn't like it was when I was growing up. There you had a clear distinction between editorial and reporting. Now every story is an editorial. Every story decides that they're going to do push the story in the way they want it to go. The thing about the internet that's so terrific is that it opens up discussion. You can leave a comment, you can write your own letters. There's no limit to the size of it.
Well, the other thing too, and then we'll get into Bob's take on the corruption issue, is it's a multimedia. You can have a video interview.
Exactly.
You can have public records that you can attach that in a newspaper with the sheets, and you don't have that. It's one dimensional. You can hear it, you can see it. Bob, looking at the whole issue with for example, with Oak Hill, when that police department was right at the height with the, you know, cocaine, police chief of the cocaine passed, and you know, this officer and that officer involved in things. Once that got once that got on the internet, and we kind of ran with that, then it kind of like segued into the whole issue of the CRA and the advertising authorities. Tell us about, you have a 3-word description, and I know you can't wait to say it, and we've been holding you off, but what's your theme on the situation with the two public taxing entities here? And I'll go over what they are in a minute.
I just don't look at the two public entities. I look at them all as an issue that needs to be addressed and removed. All these taxing districts are creating huge problems.
Now you're specifically talking about the hospital taxing districts or the advertising taxing districts?
All of them. If I would like to see anything go away, it would be all these taxing districts as a whole. Because again, when you look at it, everybody's appointing their friends. And I go with the old term corruption, collusion, and cronyism. Those are the 3 C's I deal with. And it's rampant here, especially in Southeast Volusia, more than anywhere else. The CRA that we've had, the advertising authority, the chamber. When you start to look at who's involved, they're all intertwined. They're all joined at the hip. There's still stories that need to come out that haven't come out yet. Some have.
And let me take that a step further and helping to make it clear for the viewers out there that are, you know, be watching this. The whole thing is that you're dealing with a finite group of insiders, whether they're merchant leaders, business people, developers,
Politicians.
and well, no, but that's
They're in there.
right. No. But I'm saying there's the money people, or the people that want the money. And then there's the politicians, most of whom are pretty inept when it comes right down to it. But they're protected by the 6-figure administrators who have their spokesman or spokeswoman, and you all see it all the time. There's a person speaking. It's amazing how many times county council issues have been coming through a spokesman. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that it's not unlike other political structures I've seen in Washington and elsewhere.
Right.
Where
Similar.
where the member of Congress, for example, or the county commissioner, or whoever, has a great number of things on his or her plate, and realistically speaking, doesn't have time to become expert on all of them, and so he delegates the authority to become expert on specific aspects of the plate to various members of his or her staff. Now, that's intelligent leadership. What you often find, though, is that the office holder, comes to delegate all of that responsibility to the staff and doesn't become expert on much of anything except how to generally spin things and dodge questions and things of this sort. When that happens, the staff become the real commissioner, the real congressman, the real office holder. And that's a very dangerous situation because staff in some of these institutions are virtually permanent.
Right. And to get rid of them, for example, Bob, maybe you could shed some light, for example, on the city attorney's issue. Not that the city attorney's a bad guy, but the contract that was drawn up for him. Tell us about that.
When Frank Gummy was first given the contract, I mean, we were at the meetings when it was discussed. And again, this does not go to Frank as an individual,
Yes, this is before my
his
time.
abilities or anything like that. But when you look at a contract such as that, where you have one attorney getting paid more money than anybody else in the state of Florida for that position.
Really?
Not only that.
No, this was New Smyrna Beach.
Just- just-
Yeah, not only that, a city with 22,000 people, and the city attorney makes as much as a U.S. Supreme Court justice, and he has an assistant.
Which is how
attorney.
much?
More so. Well, his package is about 230, 260.
Yeah.
What?
Well, more than that when you count the benefits and
So
retirement.
when you look at that, you have to say, as someone that's following this, you go, what are they expecting for this?
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't go to Frank Gummy as a person. He's a nice fella. I heard him. He's a lot of fun at a party. But I'm looking at what's this gentleman expected to do for this package. So right out of the gate, even though you just met the man, you're already forming a negative opinion because something's up. Why does New Smyrna Beach need a gentleman of this caliber getting paid that much money?
Well, you know, it's funny because one of the people running for county council for District 3, Mr. Jim Hathaway, he was the one that voted for this thing. And what'll shock the two of you, because you're not as familiar with the municipal areas we are down here on a daily basis, is that even if they entertain a motion or a vote to say goodbye to him, it's upwards of a $500,000 payout.
Oh
I'm
my
sure he has a
gosh.
parachute, sure.
And
The
growing
parachute
each
is the
year.
biggest one that exists in probably in the state.
Well, see, that's why we should have contested races. Still, I think it's important for people to have these kinds of things out in the open. Where else do we find out about them? News Journal isn't writing about it.
Well, see, that's the problem too, because if there was one defining moment, I know we could spend a whole show on this, but if there was one defining moment, it was within the last 2 years, leading into this election, and I thought that it would finally be a wake-up call, but somehow it just got forgotten. And that was the American Music Festival fiasco.
Oh, please.
Where the college, but I mean, look at what it did to the college. A president lost his job and his reputation, at least for a while, until the big players on the private sector picked him up. You have the top tuition that had to be raised, programs that had to be cut, and some of these politicians running for office now were serving on this emergency or this committee to try to recoup the money. They were the same people that blew the money with this behind-the-scenes contract
And
deal.
they did nothing. They had one meeting.
You can talk about that,
and
Sally.
I wrote reams of paper about this because it was so unbelievable that the Daytona State College Board of Trustees would allow...
Appointed by the governor.
Appointed by the governor, all individually appointed by the governor, would allow their board
And not
chairman,
necessarily this governor.
who was John Tanner at the time, to craft a contract to get rid of Kent Sharples, the former president of Daytona State College,